Hi, this is Stephen Rothberg with College Recruiter. At College Recruiter, we believe that every student and recent graduate deserves a great career. Today, I am joined by three superb guests from the U.S. Department of State, and we're going to be talking about their virtual internship program, which is the name of the department is the Virtual Student Federal Service. The reason for the conversation today is that there's recently been a lot of discussion online through discussion groups, blogs, social media, etc., where employers that are trying really hard to adapt their internship programs to cope with COVID-19, where rather than interns working in person in offices or other facilities, those interns are going to be working remotely. Those employers often have had little to no experience with interns working remotely, and in some cases with employees working remotely. College Recruiter has had a 100% remote workforce since 1997. So for us, the technology, managing people who are working remotely, dealing with getting documents, et cetera, back and forth, it's kind of old hat to us, but we're also a fairly small organization. It's easier for an organization of 10, 12 people to do that, to adapt like that, than for an organization of hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands. U.S. Department of State is one of the biggest organizations in the country, and they've had a virtual internship program, I just learned, for a decade. So if we could go around, and then Nora, then Chloe, then Amelia, introduce yourselves and maybe talk a little bit about each of your roles within VSFS, that would be great. Nora?
Great. Thanks, Steve. And thanks for this opportunity to make sure that students all over the country know about the Virtual Student Federal Service. Just 10 years ago, if you had Googled VSFS, what would have come up would have been Victoria's Secret fashion show. But now, if you Google VSFS, you see it stands for the Virtual Student Federal Service, because we're the largest virtual internship in the world. And yeah, we've been at it 10 years, which is why suddenly I think everybody's turning to us to say, wait a minute, how do you do this? And should we do this? Or should we just cancel? So that's what I do.
Awesome. And Chloe?
Yeah, so I'm a senior at the University of Maryland, and I've been interning with VSFS and with USA Study Abroad for the last, I don't know how many months, but since August. So it's a whole academic year-long internship for me, and it's completely remote. And then I actually discovered the program because I'm a Gilman Scholar. So I studied abroad and I received a scholarship through USA Study Abroad. And then while I was abroad, I learned about this internship program and it sounded really fascinating. So that's how I discovered this opportunity and got involved.
Cool, thank you. Amelia?
Hi everyone, my name is Amelia VanderLaan, and I'm the outreach officer in the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs in the State Department's USA Study Abroad branch. I'm also in the Foreign Service, and so most of my job is helping promote and diversify study abroad. And so we do that not only through State Department programs that we run, such as the Gilman Scholarship Program, which helps merit-based scholarships for students to study abroad, but also the Critical Language Scholarship Program to learn 15 different critical needs languages over the summer. And we also help higher education through institutional grants. So most of what we have done with Chloe is to work on sharing the good story about how study abroad is such an amazing thing and how we make that a better thing as the federal government.
Awesome. And two side notes, and then we can kind of get into the meat of the conversation. One side note is just before we went live with the video, we kind of discovered that between the four of us, we're from 4 different generations. So we have the baby boomer, the Gen X, the millennial, the Gen Z. All of us, I think, share a passion for virtual internships, for internships in general. Definitely, like Amelia, you were talking about the study abroad. We've definitely, my wife and I have 3 adult kids. and all three of them have international experience. My wife and I both traveled internationally when we were young adults and continue to do so. So for people who have the opportunity to study abroad, work abroad, it's just fantastic. You come back to, well, we live in Minneapolis, you come back here and you realize that just the way things operate here it's not necessarily right or wrong, but it sure is different than how it operates in Brazil, and we can learn from that, which is super. So a question, and maybe Amelia, this is probably best directed to you, is, kind of flashback, 11 years, 12 years, when probably people were thinking about the creation of the virtual student federal service. What prompted it? Why did it get started?
I think that's a me question.
Okay.
Which is it actually got started as just somebody in the Secretary of State's office just kind of wrote a line in a speech, and the Secretary of State gave a speech at NYU, a commencement address, and said, starting now, the State Department is going to have virtual interns. And the State Department,
surprise!
Everybody at the State Department started saying, oh my gosh, who's going to do this? Who's going to do this? And it ended up in our office, which is the Office of the Information Resource Management, that's technical office at the State Department, and in the tiny office of e-diplomacy, which is an innovation office. So it's a very small, innovative office, and we took it on, and it went from an idea, just a line in a speech, within a year to be 40 interns working for the Department of State. And in the 10 years since its inception, it's now, this past year, it's been 1,200 interns working for 55 federal agencies. So it includes NASA, the Smithsonian, NIH, Treasury, the National Science Foundation, everything. So USAID, and the virtual student federal service is really connecting the power and the imagination of US students to the government in very real ways with really concrete results.
Interesting. So when I was learning a little bit or doing some research on VSFS, that I went to LinkedIn, and because there's for if you want to sort of get a really good little snapshot of what an employer does, what their website is, how many employees they have, where they're located, LinkedIn has a company page for just about every organization.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it's like a brand new organization, it might not. If it's a tiny little organization with 1 or 2 employees, it might not. But just about every organization with more than a handful of employees, it's been around for more than 6 months, it does. And it's really clear from the LinkedIn company page that they have for VSFS that it's a State Department program. And the description there and on Wikipedia also make it really clear that it's not just Department of State internships, that, like you said, it's NASA, it's USAID, you said 50 or something?
I mean, what's so incredible is that there's really just 2 full-time employees running something that every year students have to go to usajobs.gov and create a profile. And then that profile is theirs forever, which is great because it opens up lots of opportunities. And on July 1, the VSFS vacancy announcement shows up on USA Jobs. And so if students have already created a profile on usajobs.gov, then they can go in the month of July, find that VSFS vacancy announcement, and it throws them to our site, which has, this year, surely it'll be 700 to 1,000 projects. And the projects are across 55, it will be at least 55 agencies of the government. So if you're interested in the work of FEMA, or if you're interested in the work of the Department of Justice or FBI or any specific organizations, financial organizations, and anything that the government does, which is basically everything, then you can find just incredible opportunity.
Yeah, and especially this year with COVID-19, with so many internships being shortened, with so many internship offers being rescinded, there are definitely a lot of students and even recent grads, people who have just graduated, that want the internship for experience to help them find that first job upon graduation. And some schools require the completion of an internship in order to graduate. Does VSFS work with those schools? I mean, is this, if you're a student and you actually, this will be a great question for you, Chloe, right? Because this is you. So you're a currently enrolled student. Does University of Maryland require you to have an internship prior to graduation? And does this satisfy that?
So University of Maryland as a whole, I don't believe it requires an internship. I think that's generally more common at smaller universities or smaller colleges. But within the university, I'd say at least most, if not all of the majors individually do require an internship. So even though it might not be university-wide, essentially it does, because every program will require having that hands-on experience. So that answers that part. And then for me, this internship did not do that, only because I already had an internship that fulfilled my internship requirement. But and Nora, I'm sure you can confirm or correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty confident if I did need the credit through VSFS, that this experience would be able to satisfy that requirement.
That's right, Chloe.
Okay,
Mhm.
that's fantastic. I mean, a lot of the career service office professionals that we interact with are struggling to help their students find internships, especially the students who may have had an internship lined up months ago that are still in some cases unsure if they're going to have an internship, because some employers haven't decided that yet. In some cases, those internships have been canceled, and those students are maybe heading into their senior years. And now, like, well, what do I do? So, like, we have a daughter who's going into her fourth year in university. Some of her friends have had their internships canceled. And what some of them are thinking they're going to need to do is an internship after graduation. And this is another option. So if they've had that internship canceled July 1 at 12:01 a.m., I know what website they need to be on. And actually, Nora, you were saying that they can go now, get their profile set up on USA Jobs, which is not a huge undertaking. It's just kind of like, contact
Annoying.
information, uploading your resume, filling in. If you've applied for a job online, you can apply, you can get registered on usajobs.gov. There's no,
No, that's right,
nothing
Steve.
magical.
I mean, it's not magical. That's right. You just have to decide you're going to do it. It's going to take an hour or two, because I don't think you can upload a resume. You have to build it right there in site. But going to usajobs.gov and just doing that, making yourself do that, every student should do that, because there's a wealth of opportunity that most students wouldn't even think of. And in the VSFS program, there's something for everybody. Every year in the last couple of years, we've seen more and more need for graphic design, for graphic designers, for artists, for videographers. There is something for everyone, literally, whether you're a scientist or an engineer, a computer software expert, a data guru. There's something for everybody. The U.S. government needs your service.
Yeah, and Amelia, maybe you can talk to the internships. Or a couple questions: Are any of them paid? Are they all unpaid? And also, in terms of the project length, it sounds like Chloe's is much longer than sort of your typical 8 to 12 week internship. Is Chloe's internship sort of the norm, where it's like, a year or whatever, or the projects, are they sometimes just a few weeks? How, maybe you can talk to those two things.
Yeah, sure. So first off, VSFS internships are not paid. They're not technically federal employees, so they don't receive employee benefits. But what we really try to do is make sure they gain invaluable work experience through these remote internships and learn more about the federal government. I started off many, many years ago as a physical intern at one of our embassies overseas. I also was unpaid then, but that gave me an opening into what the federal government was all about. And I wouldn't be in the Foreign Service if I hadn't had that experience. And so I think making sure that these projects are really robust and substantive is critical. And the links for VSFS are usually the full academic year in general, and they're usually a 5 to 10 hour a week commitment. And a lot of those projects are asynchronous, particularly when you're dealing with time zones. Say you're on the other side of the world, it can be really, really helpful to have an intern who is on the East Coast or the West Coast, because they can literally be working on things. So you open up your inbox and part of that project is done. And so you really can do these things anywhere in the world. And you have to think about, like, what are the things you're trying to accomplish as an organization? Do you have these blue skies projects that you would love to do, but you don't have the bandwidth for? Like, can your intern work on developing a proposal for an idea you have? And how are you going to communicate with this person throughout to sort of have substantive, meaty projects that really, really help your organization? And how many interns do you want to have? Sometimes it's great to have 2, not 1, because they can collaborate together. So you're not only using great collaborative stuff with your intern, but they're collaborating with each other. So there's a lot of best practices there that really can make this system work incredibly well, not just for the interns, but more importantly, the organization as well.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. So a couple things come to mind that if I can just sort of build on what you said. One of the vendors that College Recruiter has is they're located in the UK. And we have a weekly standing meeting with them that actually I was just on just before the 4 of us or 5 of us jumped on this call. Because they're 6 hours ahead of us most of the year, when I get in at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, it's the afternoon for them. So they've had like the whole morning to take information through yesterday, compile it, get it into a report, get it into my inbox. It gives me usually at least an hour to kind of go through it. So then when we jump on a Zoom call, we're very productive. They don't have to sort of be debriefing me. I have an opportunity to read that. So the massive changes in time zones can be your best friend, or it can be your worst enemy too, right? If it's 4 p.m. and you're the hiring manager and you need something done by the end of the day at 5 p.m., good luck if that person's in Singapore, because they're probably sleeping. But if it's 4 p.m. and you just want it on your desk before you get in the next morning, which I think in corporate America is much more the speed, then it's fantastic, because that person now has the entire day to get that done. So Amelia, question, just a clarification. So it sounds to me like many, perhaps most of the internships or the entire academic year, is that, I just want to be clear for students, career services that are listening, are they all like that? Or is it just kind of 70, 80% of them? What I'm wondering is like, are there any internships that might actually just be 3 weeks, 2 months?
Well, I think Chloe might have a good answer there, because we actually are not the only virtual internship she's ever had. So though and Nora can correct me if I'm wrong, I think that pretty much across the board, VSFS internships are usually the academic year. Obviously, we're launching our summer program as a new initiative, but generally that sort of has been the bandwidth. But I don't know if Chloe has had other sort of short-term virtual interns she can kind of attest to.
Yeah, so I've had two, technically 3 other jobs that are like virtual or remote. One of them was also academic year, but that was more of a student job for my honors college. And then I think the other most comparable virtual internship I've had was for a really small nonprofit. And it was really, it's barely nonprofit. It was like 5 people who meet once a month. But it was like a local neighborhood group, and I was the remote intern, and that was for the summer. So it was only about 3 months. And then kind of to go back to your question about compensation, even though it was a small nonprofit, they actually did offer a stipend. So it kind of just goes to show the range of compensation and hours and time that can go into each different experience.
And those two other internships, it sounds like they were not through VSFS.
Oh, yeah, they were different.
Okay. So Nora, do you know, are the sort of the duration of the internships offered by VSFS, are they all academic year? Are there some that are shorter?
VSFS was set up to be a long-term engagement. That's for a couple of reasons. And one is that it's set up, I think it's advertised as 10 hours a week for the academic year. And the key to a successful internship is, I think the reason it grew so quickly and is now where it is that it's competitive. So that competitive nature, I think, gives a little spice to the sauce, that students are allowed to pick 3 of the hundreds of projects that are available and then argue for themselves. So they write a personal statement of interest. So when they go to usajobs.gov and they register, and then VSFS vacancy announcement on July 1, they go and they click that VSFS vacancy announcement, it throws them to our site. Then there's hundreds of projects. There's so many projects, it's hard to wade through. You can filter and look for, I think we did a little, just a little UX test among students to find out how do you pick, like how do you settle on which project to bid on? And a lot of students look for agencies that they think are kind of sexy or something, like, ooh, CIA, yeah, okay. And yet there's another way you can pick projects, which is your skill set. You can think, wow, I really want to work on, I think, some mapping, if I remember, right, Chloe? And I think there's some students who want to work on data analysis or data visualization. You can filter for the skill sets and decide which projects will make you better by the end. And so that long-term engagement lets you build a relationship with a mentor, lets you come up with concrete results. And many universities also require a certain number of hours for a certain length of time, the course, a semester long or a year long internship. So lots of universities look to VSFS to give them the results-oriented projects that will be honored with credit, with course credit.
Okay, cool. Question for, I'm not sure which of the 3 of you would feel this is sort of best directed to you. I suspect it'll be either Amelia or Nora, but if you were to receive a call from an employer, and that employer were to say, hey, we're considering adapting our internship program so that all of our interns are going to be remote. What are some best practices? What are some tips? What should we, you guys have been doing this for 10 years. You've done things, I'm sure, well, and some things that were a learning experience. What are some of those tips that you would provide to an employer that is trying to set up a virtual internship program for this year?
You go first, Amelia.
Okay, so I think first and foremost, my biggest tip to employers would be like really giving good work, like substantive projects, and really thinking about like, why do I want an intern? What do I want them to accomplish? And so once you have that as a baseline foundation, where particularly recurring things are really helpful. So if you have a weekly newsletter, if you have particular graphic design sets that you need on a scheduled basis, that way a student can keep working on those, grow and develop over time. I also think that really making sure you have an actual plan for how you're going to manage somebody remotely, because it works a little bit differently than being able to pop over to someone's cubicle. So are you doing a weekly call once a week? Are you doing stuff on Zoom? But basically develop a plan and stick to it. And that doesn't mean that you can't reschedule calls or things like that, but really, really try to have that scaffolding in place so you can set up your expectations, know what you're trying to do, and then you can give like real-time feedback to your interns so they know if they're doing a good job, and you know if you're getting what you want out of the entire interaction as well. And then a sort of last tip I would say is give your interns credit for the work they do. Like if they did an amazing presentation for you, when you email that to your colleagues, give a shout out to your intern. It's great recognition for them, but it also shows that you're a good manager taking care of your people as well. But I'm sure Nora has tons of other good thoughts because she sort of knows this program even better than we do.
I want to work for you, Amelia. I think it comes down, I'm going to throw an acronym.
Get in line, Nora. Get in line.
Give you a new acronym, which is SOFT, which is like to be kind. Being kind is so important, especially when it's virtual. So you can't give all the in-person clues of support that you might. If you take the word soft, ask for structure and schedule. I think Amelia said scaffolding. Make sure you have a lot of structure. You need more structure when it's virtual than when you do it in person, because you need to understand for each other, you know, what's the deal? What day you can decide together the parameters, what time works for each person each day, how often should you meet? It's surely once a week, but as employers struggle to figure out whether they should cancel everything or go virtual. I mean, we default to virtual, go ahead. Just you make sure that there's a lot of structure and scheduling in place. And then O for being open. Open the office meetings, open those Zoom meetings, and include your intern. That intern's gonna make a contribution. They need to be at the table. So open the door and be open to their suggestions. If you don't know how to do something, ask the intern. If you don't know which technology to use, ask the intern. The interns are making contributions that are keeping the US government right there at the forefront of emerging technologies, thanks to students and thanks to students' understanding of technology now. The F is for flexible. You have to be more flexible than you ever were in person. You have to be really flexible. And T for technology. Decide which technologies you and the intern are going to use together, and let them show you a new way. Let them show you something they like that you don't know about. So kind of it all wraps up into a soft approach and being kind in your emails.
Yeah, and just to jump in really quickly, I think a really great takeaway from VSFS is that and a big concern people have about virtual internships is that they can't, you know, people worry that a virtual internship can't replace an in-person physical internship. But I think one of the best ways that Amelia has really succeeded as a supervisor in making a virtual experience comparable, if not in some ways better than a physical internship, is that she mentioned feedback and sharing credit. And those are two things she does really well that really help me as an intern. So whenever she does share something I've worked on, she does mention me, and then she loops me into the feedback so I can see exactly how my work is being used and how it's being received. And then when I do get feedback, she explains to me, this is who said what, this is their role in our department. And especially for an organization as large and complex as the State Department, having someone break that down for me, like these are the roles, this is kind of the hierarchy, here's how things are structured, that's really valuable for any organization, but again, especially the US government. And I think that is a way people wouldn't expect, that you can still get the benefits of networking and still learn organizational cultures and how organizations work as an intern, but at a distance.
Yeah, and two quick things I'll add to just sort of just build on what the three of you have shared is at College Recruiter, we've found that the virtual interns or employees, we have to manage by outcomes. It's not about being at your desk from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. It's not about process, like are you busy? It's about, did you get the work done? Did you get it done properly? Was it done on time? Did it, was it have the impact that it was supposed to? And so it's really important, and it sounds like Amelia does a great job with this, of sharing that, right? Not everything that you do is going to be perfect, right, Chloe? I mean, if you send something in and it needs adjusting, tweaking, whatever, feedback can be positive and it can also be corrective. And I think one of you was talking about if the projects can be recurring, it's an e-newsletter, right? If that logo wasn't right, if the style of writing needed to be improved upon, if you're writing in the passive voice and and you prefer the active voice as an organization, whatever, then the next time you can take advantage of that learning. The other thing I would just add from what you're saying too about being looped in and you can see the impact of your work is it's not just for the benefit of the intern. It's also for the benefit of the manager. The best boss I ever had went out of his way when eons ago, when I was probably about Chloe's age. I worked when I was in grad school at Honeywell. And my boss there was a senior vice president. He reported to the CEO. It was an 80,000 person company. So I was extremely low on the corporate ladder, but only 2 steps removed from the CEO. So I got to sit in on some meetings with other senior vice presidents. And one time the CEO walked in and I could see instantly that in a 1 hour meeting, 2 minutes of it was something that I had worked on. And if there were any questions about what that issue, I was the expert. But the rest of the time, I could grasp how my work fit into the whole picture. And it was humbling because I could see that I was just a tiny sliver, which I think is good for a young adult to see that, maybe your boss isn't such an idiot. They've got a lot of other stuff to worry about than just, the little piece that you do. And I think as a young adult, a lot of times it's hard to see that big picture and see where you fit in. But when you do get that learning and you go back to your desk and the next thing that you work on, you're going to have a much better appreciation for the work that your manager does and what his or her hot button issues are. Like, what do you need to do to help your manager? And then, of course, that then really helps your manager. So before we close, the last question that I have would be for the benefit of the students. If maybe Chloe, you can do this because you're going to be talking to your peers this way. From a student who is looking at being a virtual intern, whether it's through the VSFS program or a small nonprofit like you did, or a Fortune 1000 company, what are some tips that you have for the student to help ensure that internship is valuable, not just in terms of them getting good experience and getting course credit, but maybe also in being able to convert that internship into a permanent job upon graduation?
Yeah, I think definitely, I'm very fortunate in that Amelia just was automatically looping me into feedback and seeing how the products I'm working on are being shared. But if you have a supervisor who's not already doing that, I'm a big believer in, even as a student and as an intern, you can take that agency and you can ask to have a better understanding of your role in the bigger picture. So even though you are working virtually, you can ask to see how your contributions are being used. So just kind of taking that responsibility. And then there's a lot of things that are smaller, but I think are becoming more and more kind of universal as everyone is now being forced to work from home, such as creating a regular routine for yourself and setting apart. For me, I do certain days or certain hours, having a distinct workspace. Another big thing is, one of the main benefits of an internship is seeing how an organization works from the inside. And as a virtual intern, even though I can't do that physically, I can still pick up a lot of the nuances and a lot of the complexities of my organization just by taking cues from Amelia or the other people who I interact with, seeing how they refer to things, how they address their emails, picking up on that etiquette and kind of seeing how the organization functions is really helpful, and helps you kind of navigate and interact as a student. Also, another big thing for virtual and a successful virtual internship is being very cognizant of deadlines, because it can be harder to structure your time. And if you are struggling to multitask, or if you're overwhelmed by having several projects, really reaching out, keeping that open communication, asking, can you help me identify what are the priorities? what should I be working on, how should I be spending my time. Those are all really helpful. And then I think one of the last main things is really, I mean, again, it's all about communication, which is funny because I'm a communication major. But I think another helpful thing for me is, I communicate to Amelia if I'm going to be unavailable for vacation, or if there's a deadline coming up and I know I'm going to be offline at certain hours during a day, just letting her know, hey, I'm not going to be online for most of Friday, but I'll be back in the evening. And then she just has that knowledge that I won't be responsive, but I will be back eventually. And then just, working from home and working virtually, it's hard to separate your work from your life. So making sure that you set aside your offline hours and giving yourself time to unplug, and knowing that you don't have to always be responsive to every single email at all hours of the day, unless someone says you have to for like a special reason. And so just, scheduling in that time to make sure you're not burning out. And then knowing the importance of it. I think those are all pretty core universal things that any virtual intern should consider, or any intern can think about if they're considering a virtual internship. That would be helpful.
Yeah, and I totally agree. One thing that we found with our virtual employees, the ones who work the best virtually are the ones who err on the side of communicating.
Yeah.
And also timing of the communication is important, right? So if your boss gives you a project and she asks you to do it within a week, right? She probably thinks it should take that period of time, right? And she might be wrong. You get into it and you discover, you know what, this is actually way more complicated, the scope is way different than I thought. Don't wait until after the deadline to come back to your boss and say, I'm not going to have it for you. When you start to see that you're having an issue, reach out proactively and ask for that help. And sometimes we found that actually the scope of the project was correct. It could be a week, but the communication from the manager to the intern or to the employee was poor. It was just sort of like, the men are from Mars and women are from Venus, where, it's just, you can read it either way. And the employee thought that this was a much bigger project than it actually was intended to be. And so that communication can just head things off very quickly. If you're supposed to work 5 to 10 hours a week and then somebody throws an 80-hour project at you, hey, there's a problem here, help.
Yeah. And then I think another really valuable thing from both the employer side and the student side is, as an employer, something else Amelia does a good job of is asking, hey, what kind of things do you want to work on? How is this workload for you? Is it too much? Is it too little? Do you need more? Do you need less? Do you want more of this type of work or less of that type of work? So that's really beneficial. But I think another really important element of a successful virtual internship is, as an employer, you need to trust that you hired this student and this intern because you have faith in their ability to perform the work tasks that you assign. But, maybe you weren't the person who hired them. So just if you have that disconnect, having a conversation to really understand what are this intern's strengths, getting an idea of how do they work, what are they really good at, it can then help you better assign or better communicate to know that they can work independently without as much supervision as, say, a physical intern might have. And, it helps that working relationship, and it helps the intern make the most of their time. And it's just kind of I think it's an important factor, knowing that your intern can work independently and doesn't need so much supervision, but can still bring back to you a finished draft or finished product because you identified where their strengths and skills lie.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much. And before we leave off, Nora, if I can kick it back to you, for people, whether they're employers, career service office people, students, parents, other stakeholders, if they want to find out more about VSFS, where should they go?
They should go to their computer and type in VSFS.state.gov.
and that's not Victoria's Secret.
No, it is the Virtual Student Federal Service.
You
And my
own
last word is just, I want to work for Amelia, basically.
Well, you know, it sounds like there are probably going to be something like 1,000 people directly reporting to Amelia next year. So.
It'll be fun. We'll give them good work all around.
She's a high achiever. She'll have no problem.
we do what we can in federal government.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think that between the four of you, you've probably helped save, you know, hundreds, maybe thousands of internships this summer, and we're so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.